In this video, we're going to talk about the different methods by which we can write mathematical proofs. Now, our goal is to talk about what a proof is, then the different methods of writing mathematical proofs. Now, there are some other proofs or methods of proofs, and usually they are simply a combination of the different methods that we're going to discuss here. So first of all, what is a proof? Okay, so a proof is a logical argument that tries to show that the statement is true. Now take note, we have here an adjective, logical. So your argument must follow the different rules of logic that we have discussed earlier. Now, a mathematical proof is somewhat different from the proofs in some other fields. Okay? For example, in the court of law, okay? We're talking about legal matters here. So if an accused is proven guilty, okay, is not really 100%, okay, guilty in a sense that there is still a chance that he is innocent. Okay, so this is different. Okay, so this is different from what a mathematical proof is. Okay, in mathematics, when you say, so in mathematics, okay, when a statement is proven to be true, so it is without a doubt, so we're talking about 100% here, so true. Okay, now in some other field, for example statistics, we sometimes formulate hypothesis. So a hypothesis is a statement, and then we try to sort of gather enough evidence, okay, in order to disprove, okay, so disprove, okay, our hypothesis. Now the keyword here is prove, and in statistics we cannot really disprove something. Okay, we cannot really disprove this statement, okay, because there is still a chance that the researcher, perhaps you, made a mistake. Made a mistake in your decision-making process. So again, no, so this one, okay, is different from the proof, okay, that we write in pure mathematics. So next, So let us talk about one of the methods by which we can write a mathematical proof. So it is called direct proof. Now, a direct proof assumes that the hypothesis of a conjecture is true and then uses a series of logical deductions to prove that the conclusion of the conjecture is true. Now, we usually use this method to prove an implication. So wherein we have here what you call remember, the hypothesis, and Q, our conclusion. Now, the hypothesis is also called the antecedent, while the conclusion sometimes called the consequent. Now, in a direct proof, we assume that P or the hypothesis is true, and then from that assumption that our hypothesis P is true, we must be able to come up with our conclusion. We must be able to show that Q is also true. Again, if we assume that P is true, we must be able to show that Q is also true. If we can do that, we have already proven our implication. Now, modus ponens is a Latin phrase, and it means a valid argument form or a rule of inference in logic. Now, this is also known as affirming the antecedent. Now, let us take a look back at what a direct proof is. In a direct proof, we assume that P or the hypothesis is true, and by assuming that P is true and we are able to show that Q is also true, we have proven the implication. Now, in modus ponens, okay, we affirm the antecedent. Now, in our implication, P implies Q. P, which is the hypothesis, is also our antecedent. Okay? So, if you will notice, modus ponens is simply a direct method of proof. So the form of modus ponens is if P then Q. So assuming this is true, and we assume P, therefore Q must also be true. So in this example, if the cake is made with sugar, then the cake is sweet. Now, if this is true, and we assume that the cake is made with sugar, okay, therefore, the cake is sweet. Now, let us use modus ponens or direct proof, okay, in order to prove that if n is even, so is n squared. Now, here's a couple of things that we need to remember. So what are the tools, okay, that we need? So when we say tools, we are talking about the concepts. We're talking about the definitions. Okay, we talk about lemmas. Okay, we talk about theorems that were already proven by previous mathematicians, no? So all of these are the tools that we need or might need in order to prove a statement. Now, in order to prove that n is even, okay, we must be able to use the definition of what an even number is. Okay? So, I'm going to write a definition, or one of the definitions of what an even number is. So if a number n is an even number, then it means that n is twice some integer p. Now, we do not know what really is p, or there is really no need to know what the integer p is. But what we are sure of is that if n is an even number, then n is twice some integer, which we can denote by p. So where p is an integer. So this is one of the definitions of an even integer. Okay? Now, of course, if we talk about odd integers, we can use this definition. We can use this definition of an odd integer. So if m is an odd integer, okay, then m is simply twice some integer q plus 1. Where q is some integer. Now, if you want to verify these definitions, okay, take for example, okay, so for this definition of even integer, for example, 8. What is 8? 8 is equals to 2 times some integer p. Our p could be the integer 4. Now, for an example of an odd integer, so how about 13? So 13 is an odd integer. So 13 is simply equal to 2 times an integer 6. So q will be your 6 here. Okay, so 2 times 6 is 12, and then plus 1. So you can see that the different definitions for an even integer and an odd integer hold, okay, for these examples. Okay, so for these examples. So what are we going to prove? We need to prove that if n is even, so is n squared. So this time, let us write the proof. Proof. Okay? So let us introduce an even integer. So let n be an even integer. Now, if n is an even integer, then by the definition of what an even integer is, we can say that n is equals to twice some integer p. So where p is some integer, and if n is equals to 2p, it means that if we square both sides, we will get n squared is equals to 4p squared. Now, we want to be able to format this expression 4p squared in such a way that we would be able to apply the definition of what an even number is. So I'm going to factor out a 2, and what remains inside the pair of parentheses would be 2p squared. Now, note, p is an integer. If we square an integer p, we will get p squared. P squared is, again, another integer. Okay, so the whole of this p squared is an integer. If you multiply that by 2, you will get another integer. So 2p squared, okay, the whole of 2p squared is an integer. So, on the right side, okay, at the right side of our equal sign, okay, we have 2 times an integer 2p squared. I'm going to denote 2p squared by letter t or variable t. Note, this 2p squared, okay, I am denoting it by t. Okay, 2p squared, as I have explained earlier, is again an integer. Now, since t is equal to 2p squared, okay, I just denoted 2p squared by letter t, by variable t. Okay, so t is equal to 2p squared. Okay, now 2p squared is an integer, therefore t, which is equal to 2p squared, is also an integer. So t is an integer. Now, again, what is the definition of even integer? It is twice some integer. Now, since n is squared is twice some integer t, okay, so n squared is even. And thus, we have proven that if n is even, n squared is also even. And thus, we have completed our proof. So this time, let us prove that the sum of two odd numbers is even. So we need to introduce two odd numbers. Let us denote them by m and n. So let m and n be odd numbers. So m is odd and n also an odd number means, again, let us use the definition of odd number. M is equals to twice some integer plus 1, while n is also twice an integer plus 1. So those integers, I denoted them by P and Q. Now, look at the problem. We need to take the sum and show that the sum of the two odd integers are even. So what is the sum of the odd integers? Simply m plus n. Now, what is m? M is, by definition, equal to 2p plus 1. While n, by definition, is simply equal to 2q plus 1. So we have m plus n is equals to 2p plus 2q plus 2. And the reason we can remove the parentheses and reorder the terms is because of the commutative and associative properties of addition. Now, at this level, we are working with arithmetic operations. So we can use whatever laws, properties, concepts that we have learned earlier. So I simply reorder, and even if you don't reorder, you will still get the same result. You simply need to combine 1 and this one here. So m plus n is equal to, let us factor out the integer 2 or the number 2. So you will get p plus q plus 1. And take a look at p plus q plus 1. P plus q plus 1 is an integer p plus an integer q plus an integer 1. So this is simply the sum of three integers. And the sum of integers is again another integer. So if we denote p plus q plus 1 by t, so I'm denoting p plus q plus 1 by t. T is, of course, an integer. Now, since t is an integer, by definition, twice an integer will give you an even number. So m plus n is even. And thus, we have shown that the sum, okay, the sum of two odd integers m and n, so this is the sum, m and n is even. And thus, we have completed our proof. Next, let us talk about another method of proof called proof by contraposition. Now, remember that we have shown the statement, or rather this statement, to be a tautology. So remember, we have shown that this is a tautology. And if this is a tautology, it means that P implies Q. Okay, the statement at the left side of the double implication, the double-headed arrow, is logically equivalent to the right side. Of our double implication. It means that these two are logically equivalent. Now, since they are logically equivalent, we can, instead of proving the given implication that needs to be proven, we can instead prove its contrapositive, since the contrapositive is logically equivalent to the given implication. So a couple of Latin phrase here. So modus tollens. Modus tollens is a valid argument form or rule of inference in logic. It is also known as denying the consequent. Now, if we discuss what modus tollens is, you will find out that it is also what you call proof by contraposition. So let us take a look at its form. If P, then Q, and we assert Q not to be true, therefore P is also not true. Now, if you combine these two, you are looking at somewhat the contrapositive of the first statement. Okay? So in our example, if the cake is made with sugar, so this is our P, then the cake is sweet, so this is our Q. So we assert, asserting is sort of assuming, okay, that the statement is true. So if we assert that this is true, okay, the cake is not sweet, therefore we will lead to our conclusion that, okay, the cake is not made with sugar. The cake is not sweet is our not Q. So look at our Q. The cake is sweet. So not Q is the cake is not sweet. Okay? The cake is not made with sugar. So this is our not P. So this is our not P. So in order to use modus tollens, okay, we simply use the contrapositive. We simply need to prove the contrapositive. So in this example, we're going to prove that if n squared is an even integer, then the number n is an even integer. Now, you can try using direct proof, but I don't think it would be that easy or as easy as when you prove the contrapositive instead. So let us use proof by contraposition. So to prove by contraposition, we will prove the contrapositive. Instead. Now, what is the contrapositive? So, what is the contrapositive? So, in our given implication, n is even is our conclusion, or we can denote this by Q. So, what is not Q? So, what is not Q? So, n is not even. Okay? So, what is not P? So, if this is our P, what is not P? Not P is n squared is not even. Okay? So, this is our not Q. This is our not P. So, the statement not Q implies not P is our contrapositive. Okay? So, let us place here the word if, and then here the word then. Okay? So instead of proving directly our original statement, we will instead prove the contrapositive, which is perfectly valid. Now, if n is not even, then n squared is not even. We can begin by, as we did earlier, introduce an even integer. So let n be an even integer. No. We need to let n be not. So let n be not an even integer. So when you say n is not an even integer, it means that n is an odd integer. So n is an odd integer. Remember, we are now proving if n is not even. If n is not even, so we must start with that. So n is not an even integer. So if n is not an even, n is an odd integer. Now, n is odd means what? Means n, by definition of an odd integer, n is equal to 2p plus 1, where p is some integer. And so, look at our original problem, or look at the contrapositive that we are trying to prove. We must show that n squared is not even, or n squared is an odd number. Okay? So let us square n. So let us continue our proof. So n squared is equals to 2p plus 1 squared. So n squared is equals to 4p squared plus 4p plus 1. Now, we must show that n squared is an odd number. So I'm going to try to format our expression 4p squared plus 4p plus 1 in such a way that we will get a definition of an odd number. So I'm going to factor out a 2, which leaves us 2p squared plus 2p, and do nothing with 1. So 2p squared plus 2p is an integer. Why? Because p is an integer. If you square p, you get p squared, also an integer. Multiply that by integer 2. So 2p squared is an integer. 2 times an integer is an integer. If you add both of these, you will get another integer. So let us denote the whole of this by t. So t is 2p squared plus 2p, okay, which is an integer. Oh, by the way, you have your 1 here, so plus 1. Now, look at here. So this is 2t plus 1. So t is an integer. So this is exactly a definition of an odd number. So therefore, n squared is odd. Now, look at our starting point. We have asserted that n is an odd number, and the square of that odd number leads us to conclude that n squared is also an odd number. In other words, we have already proven the contrapositive, that if n is not even, or if n is an odd number, then n squared is not even, or n squared is also an odd number. Now, we have proven the contrapositive. It means that we have also proven our original implication, that if n squared is even, then n is even. Reductio ad absurdum is a form of argument that attempts either to disprove a statement by showing it inevitably leads to a ridiculous, absurd, or impractical conclusion, or to prove one by showing that if it were not true, the result would be absurd or impossible. So examples of this is, if you assume or state that the earth is flat, this would lead to some conclusions like people would be falling over the edges, which is kinda ridiculous. So what else? So how about if you say that there is a least positive rational number? If you believe this to be true, then it will lead to some nasty conclusions, like if there is a least positive number that is also a rational number, then we can divide that rational number by 2. So we can divide x by 2 if x is the least rational number, okay, to come up with another rational number which is less than x, but x is supposed to be your least rational number. So how come you can come up with another rational number that is less than what you have deemed to be the smallest positive rational number? So this statement will lead to absurdity. Okay? So that is one of the principle that is used by this method, okay, which is proof by contradiction. Proof by contradiction is a form of proof that establishes the truth or the validity of a proposition by showing that assuming the proposition to be false leads to a contradiction. So reductio ad absurdum and proof by contradiction are the same method. So we just have here its Latin name. As an example, let us prove that square root of 2 is irrational. So our proof will be a proof by contradiction. So in a proof by contradiction, we assume on the contrary that what we are trying to prove is not true. So if we are trying to prove that square root of 2 is rational, we assume that, so what is the negation? What is the negation of this statement? So the negation of square root of 2 is irrational is square root of 2 is rational. Now, let us try to find some statements that will eventually lead to contradiction to some other prior statements. So we have assumed that square root of 2 is not irrational. So it means that square root of 2 is rational. Now, by definition, if square root of 2 is rational, then we can express square root of 2 as a quotient of two integers. And furthermore, m and n no longer has any common factor except 1. That is, m over n, if this is a fraction, m over n is in lowest term. When you say a fraction is in lowest term, it means the numerator and the denominator only has one or only have one as a common factor. Now, we can always do that. We can always remember, we can always express a fraction in its lowest term. We can always do that. So here, I have assumed that m over n is already in its lowest term. Now, let us try some algebraic manipulations. We square both sides. So we will get 2 is equal to m squared over n squared. So by squaring both sides, so we will get 2n squared is equals to m squared. Now, take a look at the expression 2n squared. Since n is an integer, if we square n, we will get another integer. And if you multiply that integer by 2, we will get an even integer. So the whole of 2n squared is an even integer. Now, m squared, this one, is equal to 2n squared. That means m squared is an even integer. So let us continue. So I'm going to rewrite what was in the previous slide. So 2n squared is equals to m squared. So this implies that m squared is twice an integer. So m squared is even. So this is by definition. Okay, now if m squared is even, it means that m is even. So this is proven earlier. So we can use that, the result of what we have done earlier. If m squared is even, implies m is also even. Okay? Now, if m squared is even, or should I say if m is even, then m is equals to what? M is equals to 2q, where q is some integer by definition. So the definition of an even integer is that it is twice some integer. So I have denoted that integer, that some integer by q. Okay. Now, I'm going to substitute m is equals to 2q in our previous equation. So this one. So substitute m is equals to 2q in 2n squared is equals to m squared. Okay? So 2n squared is equals to m squared will give us, okay, so substitute 2n squared is equals to, so what is m? M is equal to what? M is equals to 2q. So m is equals to 2q. Okay, so m is equals to 2q. So we will have 2n squared is equals to 4q squared. Okay? Now, let us solve for n squared. So let us solve for n squared. So let us continue here. So divide both sides by 2. We will get n squared is equals to 2q squared. Now, q squared is even. No, sorry. 2q, q squared is an integer. So twice an integer is exactly a definition of even integer. So this is twice. So twice an integer q squared. So by definition, so n squared is even. If n squared is even, it means that n is even. So, look here. If m is even and n is even, okay? If m is even and n is even, they have a common factor 2. They have a common factor 2. Okay? So, let us take a look at our some assumptions prior to this slide. So we have stated explicitly that m over n is in lowest term. That is their only common factor is 1. Now m, n are even means that what? M and n have 2 as common factor, which is a contradiction. So this is a contradiction. Why? Because we have stated explicitly initially on the top of our proof that m and n has no common factor except for 1. But if we assume that we have resulted in a statement that m is even and n is even. Now, if m is even and n is even, they have a common factor 2. So, we have a contradiction. Okay? We have a contradiction that m cannot be in its lowest term. And this statement that m over n is in lowest term is simply a consequent of our assumption that square root of 2 is rational. Now, square root of 2 rational leads to this contradiction. So, therefore, this cannot be true. So, if this cannot be true, that square root of 2 is rational, this cannot be true. Therefore, square root of 2 is irrational. And that concludes our proof. In this example, we're going to prove that there are infinitely many prime numbers. Again, let us prove this by contradiction. So, what is the negation of the statement there are infinitely many prime numbers? So, the negation is there is a finite number of prime numbers. So, we assume on the contrary that there are only a finite number of prime numbers. So if there are only a finite number of prime numbers, no matter how many they are, we can denote them by P1 by P sub 1, P sub 2, P sub 3, up to P sub n, where n is not an infinite number. So there are only a finite number of prime numbers. Now, let us take the product of all these prime numbers. So let us take the product of all these prime numbers and denote them by Q. So let Q be equal to P1 times P2 times P3 times all of this finite number of prime numbers. And also, let Q be equal to let Q plus 1. So let Q plus 1. Of course, we know that Q is equal to P1, P2, P3 times up to Pn. So what is Q plus 1? It is simply equal to P1 times P2 times P3 times up to Pn, the product of all prime numbers, plus 1. So Q is simply the product. So this is simply the product of all the primes, while Q plus 1 is simply the product of all primes plus 1. Okay? Now, Q plus 1 is higher than any prime number. Okay, so by looking at its formula, by looking at its formula. Now, if Q plus 1 is higher than any prime number, and we are assuming that we have only a limited number of prime numbers, Q plus 1 must already be a composite number. So if you assume that P sub n, is the highest prime number, what does that tell us about Q plus 1? So this is higher than the highest prime number. So the number that is next to the highest prime number is already composite. So if Q plus 1 is composite, then it is divisible by a prime number. We do not know what prime number divides q plus 1, but we can denote that prime number by p sub I. But if we look at the formula, for q plus 1, we can say that it is not divisible, okay, by p sub I. It is not divisible by p sub I. So we need some real estate here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to erase something. Okay, so which one? Aha. Okay, from here. Okay. So it is not divisible by p sub I. Again, so look here, q plus 1 is divisible by p sub I. Q plus 1 is not divisible by p sub I. Now, where is this statement coming from? Okay, q plus 1 is divisible by p sub I. From here. Okay? Now, where is this statement coming from? Okay? From here. Okay? From here. Okay? So again, if q plus 1 is composite, then it is divisible by a prime number p sub I. We do not know what p sub I is, but it is a prime number. But if we look at the formula, this is the formula for q plus 1. You have the product of all prime numbers plus 1. Okay? If you due to the addition of 1 here, it is no longer divisible by any of the prime numbers, even p sub I. So, this statement, no, that q plus 1 is not divisible by p sub I leads to a contradiction. Actually, these two statements contradict each other. So, this is a contradiction. Okay? Now, look at our starting point. We have assumed on the contrary that there are only a finite number of prime numbers. Now, this statement led to a contradiction. Now, which contradiction? So these two statements, they are contradicting one another because we have assumed that there are only a finite number of prime numbers. Therefore, our assumption cannot be true. If our assumption cannot be true, there are infinitely many prime numbers. Okay, so that concludes our proof. A method by which we can show that a property holds for every natural number n is what we call proof by mathematical induction. This proof uses the following principle. So if you have here a statement, actually this is a predicate. So you have a statement P of n about a positive integer n, and suppose that the property holds for the first natural number 1, and if the property holds for some natural number k, then it also holds for the next natural number, then the statement is true for all natural numbers n. Now, you may want to include on the set of your natural numbers the number 0. Now, some authors include that, but in our discussion, I'm not going to include 0 in the set of all natural numbers. Now, there are some problems that asks or will ask you to verify whether a property holds for all positive integers and 0, including 0. But we're not going to do that in the next couple of examples. Mathematical induction can informally be illustrated by the sequential effect of falling dominoes. Now, suppose we have here an infinite number of dominoes. So this is domino number 1, this is domino number 2, this is domino number 3, domino number 4, domino number 5, domino number 6, and so on and so forth. Now, what is P of 1? Now, look at our predicate, P of n. it states that domino number n can topple the next domino. Of course, the next domino is domino number n plus 1. So, P of 1 is the statement domino number n. So, n is equals to 1. So, domino number 1 can topple the next domino. Or domino number 2. So, domino number 2. Now, in mathematical induction, we need to show that this is true. P of 1 is true. That domino number 1 can really topple the next domino or domino number 2. So that is the first step in mathematical induction. The second step in mathematical induction is to show that if P of k is true, then P of k plus 1 is also true. Now, what is P of k? What is P of k? P of k is the statement domino number k can topple domino number, what is the next domino? Next to k. So that is domino number k plus 1. Okay? So how about P of k plus 1? So this is the statement domino number k plus 1 can topple domino number. So what is the next domino next to k plus 1? So that is domino number k plus 2. So if k is equal to 3, if k is equals to 3, this means the statement domino number 3 can topple domino number 4. Okay, if your k is equals to 5, this statement is the statement domino number 5 can topple domino number 6. Now, if we can show that if this is true, then this is also true. If we can show that if P of k is true, then P of k plus 1 is also true, then we have done the second part, the second step, okay, of our method or technique called mathematical induction. Now, if P of k is true, then P of k plus 1 is true and k is equals to, for example, 5. If 5 can topple number 6 and since 5 can topple number 6, you have also shown that P of k plus 1 is true. It means that domino number 6 can also topple domino number 7. Now, if P of k is true, then your number 6 can be your K. So 6 can topple domino number 7, and P of K plus 1 means that domino number 7 can topple domino number 8. Now, how about if K is equals to 8? If K is equals to 8, if we have shown that P of K or P of 8 is also true, or if P of 8 is also true, then P of 9 is also true. It means that P of 8 toppling domino number 9 is true. So if 8 can topple number 9, then 9 can topple the next one to it, the next domino to it, which is domino number 10. Now, why is it that P of n is true for all natural numbers n? Why is this true? If we have shown the first step, or we have done the first step and we have done the second step. Now, let us take a look at the steps. So this is the first step. Show that P of 1 is true. In our domino example, domino number 1 can topple domino number 2. So that is the first step. Now, we assume that we have shown that if any domino number K can topple the next domino, then domino number K plus 1 can also topple the next one to it. So that is step number 2. So what happens is that since we have shown that 1 can topple number 2, okay? 1 can topple number 2, okay? And we have also shown that if 1 can topple number 2, take a look at our P of K. We have shown that P of K is true. We have shown that if P of K is true, then P of K plus 1 is also true. We have shown that if 1 can topple number 2, then number 2 can also topple number 3. Domino number 3. If domino number 2 can topple number 3, then it is also true that, okay, again, P of K plus 1 is true. We have also shown that domino number 3 can topple domino number 4. Now, since we have shown that if 3 can topple number 4, so that is your P of K, then number 4 can also topple number 5. So that is your P of K plus 1. Now, since 4 can topple number 5, then it also means that 5 can topple number 6. Now, since 5 can topple number 6, it means that number 6 can also topple number 7. So, it doesn't really matter whether you have an infinite number of dominoes as long as you have shown that domino number 1 can topple domino number 2, and if a domino number K can topple the next one to it, then the next domino can topple the next one to it also. So, all these dominoes will fall over. In this example, we're going to show that the sum of the first n natural numbers is simply equal to n times the quantity n plus 1 all over 2. So let us write the proof and state explicitly what method we are going to use. So, proof by mathematical induction. So let us do the basis step. So the basis step is to show that P of 1 is true. By the way, let P of n be the statement 1 plus 2 plus up to n is equals to n plus 1 all over 2. So for our basis step, let us show that P of 1 is true. So what is P of 1? What is P of 1? P of 1 is the statement 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus up to n, but n is equal to 1. But n is equal to 1. So I'm going to erase the terms 2, 3 up to n. And just retain the 1. So what is the sum of all natural numbers from 1 up to 1? So it is 1. So 1 is equal to, so n is equal to 1. Let us substitute that to the formula 1. So this is the formula. So 1 times 1 plus 1 all over 2. So remember, n is equals to 1. So we have 1 times n plus 1, 1 plus 1 all over 2. Okay. Now is this true? So this is true. So this is true. So P of 1 is true. So P of 1 is true. Now, let us do the induction step. Let us do the induction step. Now, what is the induction step? We will assume that P of k is true. And then, if P of k is assumed to be true, and we have shown that P of k plus 1 is also true, then we have done the induction step. So we are through with the induction step. So let us do that. So let us assume that P of k is true. So what is P of k? P of k is the statement 1 plus 2 plus up to what? Up to k. So we're going to assume that this is, let us substitute k to the formula. So this is our last natural number. So the formula is n times n plus 1 all over 2. Okay? So assume that this is true. So assume that this is true. P of k is true. Okay? So what is P of k plus 1? P of k plus 1 is simply 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus up to what? Up to k plus 1. No. This is not equality. This is a statement. This is a statement. So I'm going to erase the equal. So this is a statement. So we have a colon. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 up to k plus 1 is equals to, so remember this is your n now. So you have n times n plus 1. Again, substitute to the formula, the one we are trying to prove. So n, that is your k plus 1. N plus 1 is k plus 1 plus 1 all over 2. All over 2. Now, if P of k is true, no? If P of k, so if P of k, if this is true, if P of k is true, so this formula for 1 up to, for the sum of 1, 2 up to k. So if this formula is true, is this formula also true? So let us find out. So P of k is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus ... What is the last? So this is our P of k plus 1. So is equal to k plus 1 times k plus 1 plus 1 all over 2. We need to find a way to insert P of k here. So I'm going to write, instead of ending our sequence at k plus 1, I'm going to insert k. Since you have here an ellipsis, this will pass through the value k before finally reaching k plus 1. So let us try simplifying what? The right side. So this is k plus 1 times k plus 2 all over 2. Now, remember that we have assumed that P of k is true. We have assumed that P of k is true. So if P of k is true, then the whole of this is simply equal to k times k plus 1 all over 2. And then you still have k plus 1. Now, I'm not going to simplify the right side. You can do that, but I'm not going to do that in this example. So, here we have, let us simplify the left side. So, k squared plus k all over 2 plus 2k plus 2 all over 2. So, is equal to k plus 1, k plus 2 all over 2. So, we have the same denominator. We can combine the numerator. So, we have k squared plus k. So, we have k squared plus k plus, I'm going back to the previous slide, 2k plus 2. 2k plus 2. 2k plus 2 all over 2 is equals to, okay, k plus 1 times k plus 2, k plus 1 times k plus 2 all over 2. So we have here k squared plus k plus 2k, so 3k plus 2 all over 2 is equals to, okay, so k plus 1, k plus 2 all over 2. Now we can factor the numerator. So we will get, okay, k plus 1 times k plus 2 all over 2 is equals to k plus 1, k plus 2 all over 2. So what we have done is that we have shown that if 1 plus 2 plus up to k is equals to k times k plus 1 all over 2 is true, then 1 plus 2 plus up to k plus 1 is equals to k plus 1 times k plus 1 plus 1 all over 2 is also true. So remember, this is our P of k, and we have shown that if P of k is true, then P of k plus 1 is also true. So we have done the induction part. Now, let us go back and take a look at the different steps. Okay, so we have shown that P of 1 is true, and we have shown that if P of k is true, then P of k plus 1 is true. So we have done these two steps, okay, in order to prove by mathematical induction. So it means that P of n is true for all positive integers n. So in our example, 1 plus 2 plus up to n is equals to n times n plus 1 all over 2. So this is our P of n. Okay? Since we have done the two steps, the necessary steps in order to prove by mathematical induction, we know that this formula, will always hold for any natural or positive number n. This could be 1 million, 1 billion, 1 trillion, or any large number you cannot even can think of. Okay? You cannot even think of. This will always hold. This is always true. Okay? So there's really no need to verify this for any specific case. Say for example, n is equals to 1 million, n is equals to 1 billion. No? So no need for that. Because a proof by mathematical induction is generic, a general proof. Okay? In this example, we're going to prove that quantity AB raised to the power of n is equals to A raised to the power of n multiplied by B raised to the same power of n. So again, let us prove this by mathematical induction. So for our basis step, by the way, what is our P of n? P of n is the statement that AB raised to n is equals to A raised to n times B raised to n. Okay, so for our basis step, let us show that P of 1 is true. So what is P of 1? P of 1 is the statement AB raised to 1 is equals to A raised to 1 times B raised to 1. We know that this is true. Okay? So we can immediately say that P of 1 is true. So we have done the basis step. Okay. So let us do the induction step. So the induction step. Now, what is P of k? P of k is the statement A. No, we need the parenthesis. So A times B raised to k is equals to A raised to k, B raised to k. So this is the statement P of k. I'm going to erase that dirt. I'm going to erase that dirt. Okay. So we have A times B quantity. Okay. So raised to k is equal. So we're going to assume that this is true. Assume that P of k is true. assume that AB raised to K is equals to A raised to K, B raised to K is true. So remember, this is our P of K. We need to assume that this is true. Now, if we assume that P of K is true, or if we assume that AB quantity raised to K is equals to A raised to K, B raised to K is true, can we show that P of K plus 1 is also true? So let us calculate P of K plus 1, or AB raised to K plus 1. So let us do that. So AB raised to K plus 1, is this equal to A raised to K plus 1, B raised to K plus 1. Remember, that is our formula, and we need to verify if that would be true. If this is really true, is this true? If AB quantity raised to K is equals to A raised to K, B raised to K is true. So the whole of this, is this true? If this is true, so remember, this is our P of K and this is our P of K plus 1. So this is P of K plus 1, this is our P of K. If P of K is true, does it necessarily follow that P of K plus 1 is also true? So let us find out. So AB raised to K plus 1 again, this is supposed to be equal to A raised to K plus 1 times B raised to K plus 1. Now, I'm going to rewrite AB raised to K plus 1 as AB raised to K times another AB. Now, we can do that due to the laws of exponent that we have learned in algebra. So we're not going to do anything to the right side. Now, we know that by assuming, okay, by our assumption that P of K, okay, so let us go back to the previous slide. We have assumed that this is true. So AB raised to K is equals to A raised to K, B raised to K. So this is assumed to be true. So assumed to be true. So if we have assumed this to be true, we can substitute A raised to K, B raised to K, okay, to this expression. So A raised to K, B raised to K. Now, why did we do that? Because we have assumed that P of K is true. That if we raise AB to K, we get A raised to K, B raised to K. So multiplied by AB. Now, basic properties of multiplication. Okay, it is commutative, it is associative. So, using those properties, commutativity and associativity, we can reorder the factors. So, a raised to k times a, then b raised to k times b. So remember, at this point in time, we are now doing arithmetic. Okay? Now, what is a raised to k times a? A raised to k plus what? Plus 1. What is b raised to k times b? That is b raised to k plus 1. So we have a raised to k plus 1 times b raised to k plus 1. So, this is our p of k plus 1. This is the statement, p of k plus 1. This is true. This is true. Again, by assuming that p of k is true, we have shown that p of k plus 1, this is our p of k plus 1, is also true. So we have done the induction step. So let us take a look at our proof. So we have shown that p of 1 is true. Check. We have shown that if we assume p of k to be true, then p of k plus 1 is also true. So that is the induction step. So therefore, okay, so therefore, p of n is true for all n. That is 1 plus 2 plus up to no, this is the previous example. That is a times b raised to n is simply equal to a raised to n b raised to n for all n. So the proof is now complete.